Okay, good morning and welcome to our online webinar on immunity, nutrition and COVID-19, separating facts from fiction. My name is Sarah Haffenden and I'm the Marketing Communications Manager at UKZN Extended Learning, also known as UEL. In case you're unfamiliar with UEL, we are the continuing education unit of the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and we offer all the short courses on behalf of the university. So we are offering these webinars as we are in full support and compliance with the directive of a national lockdown issued to address the COVID-19 pandemic. So we are embracing the changes and have launched a number of projects aimed at providing free access to learning materials during this lockdown period. So one of these projects is our online learning webinars. This webinar is the first one from our 4-part nutrition series, and we will also be launching another new series on Tuesday, looking at resilience through mindfulness. Our webinars will continue throughout May and June on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but please do have a look at our final slide at the end of this webinar for further details on upcoming webinars, or you can visit our website www.ukznextendedlearning.com. Before I introduce you to our guest speaker today, I'd just like to advise you of the format for the session. So we will have a presentation and you're able to add any comments or ask any questions in the Q&A box. Alternatively, you can also raise your hand, and at the end of the presentation, we will do the Q&A and have any voice questions that come through. So just hold on to the end of the presentation. So our guest speaker today is Professor Susanna Kazia. She's also known as Suna. So Suna is a registered dietitian, associate professor at dietetics and human nutrition, and academic leader for teaching and learning in the School of Agriculture, Earth and Environmental Sciences at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Prior to joining UKZN in 2007, she was a senior lecturer at UT for 13 years, a senior community nutrition dietitian with the Department of Health for 3 years, and a senior clinical dietitian at Tygerberg Hospital in Cape Town for 3 years. So she holds a PhD from the University of Cape Town, a Master's of Dietetics, I need to get that word going, from University of KwaZulu-Natal, a Bachelor of Science Honours and a postgraduate diploma in hospital dietetics, and a Bachelor of Science from Stellenbosch University. She has served as an invited speaker at numerous congresses, workshops, and other events. Her research focus includes non-communicable diseases of lifestyle, obesity, infant and young child nutrition, and food security, with publications in local and international journals. She authored a book stemming from her passion to communicate scientific information to members of the public, and wrote a chapter for a scientific publication on the multidisciplinary management of colorectal cancer. Her biggest achievements to date are being a wife, mother, and monster-in-law. So I'll let her to elaborate on that. But welcome, Suna, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you for that warm introduction. Good morning, everybody. As you know, especially the whole concept surrounding immunity and what can be done to address immunity under the current circumstances of the COVID pandemic has received a lot of attention. So from a nutritional perspective, I'm hoping to give you some insights as to what the current body of knowledge is and whether diet can in fact influence your immunity in this current pandemic. Sorry, I'm just clicking here. Perfect. So just to set the scene, I think it's very important to first of all look at what is health, because there are so many aspects related to health. And they are not standalone components. So if we look at the World Health Organization, which is of course the most authoritative body on global health, the WHO actually defines health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. And it's not only the absence of disease or infirmity. So that is important to take cognizance of. I'm going to then touch on just a brief overview of immunity and immune systems, the type of immune system disorders that we get, the role of diet in immunity, touching on briefly psychological aspects and how that affects food choices, supplementation, alternative ways that people resort to boost their immunity. And then to me, very importantly this morning is just to be aware of the myths surrounding COVID, especially when it comes to dietary treatment. And then last but not least, I'm going to give you a shopping list of reliable sources of information so that you are aware of where you can actually look to get the real facts. So if we just briefly look at what immunity is, it's the body's defense against infections caused by, for instance, bacteria and viruses. And it therefore relates to the ability of an organism to resist a particular infection or toxin by the action of specific antibodies or sensitized white blood cells. Now, the reason why I underlined the concept sensitized is if you look at why, for instance, children under the age of 1 year is actually receives immunization, it's because they are given immunity to various diseases. In other words, what happens is when a child is immunized, you are nearly programming the body's immune system to recognize diseases that children are exposed to during childhood and of course ongoing in adulthood. Now, the reason why COVID is such a pandemic is because this virus is totally new to the human body. In other words, our immune system, including your white blood cells, have never been exposed to this virus, and therefore the body is unable to adequately fight against this virus. And that is why we've seen such an increase in illness and morbidity. So just a very, very brief overview on the immune system. Lymphocytes, you'll see, comes up quite a few times on this particular slide. And a lymphocyte is just another name for a white blood cell. Now, your white blood cells are produced in your bone marrow and your thymus gland. And what happens there is that the white blood cells are actually given specific, you can call it jobs to do. For instance, you get T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes. And then if we look at other organs that are involved in your immune system, you have your lymphatic nodes that actually serve as a pantry for storing your B and T lymphocytes. You also get your spleen that not only produces lymphocytes or white blood cells, but they also store large lymphocytes that are called macrophages, and they also play a very important role in affecting your immune system. And then your spleen also acts as a filter to pick up foreign substances in your bloodstream, and then actually launches the body's immune system. And then of course your tonsils also produce lymphocytes and other antibodies. And if we then look at immune system disorders, you get certain circumstances or conditions that result in a temporary immune deficiency. So for instance, people that receive chemotherapy for treating cancer, if you have an infection like the flu, it could temporarily affect your immune system. And then also importantly, smoking and alcohol. And then last but not least, a poor nutritional status, which is commonly referred to as malnutrition. So all these conditions have a temporary effect on your immune system. Then, of course, we get conditions like, for instance, HIV, where the immune system is weakened by an existing virus. And that actually makes the body more vulnerable for contracting various bacterial, fungal, and viral infections. And then last but not least, you get autoimmune diseases, which is where the body's own immune system is actually attacking its own organs. And therefore, autoimmune disease, an example of that would be, for instance, type 1 diabetes. Because in this particular circumstance, type 1 diabetes, which is less prevalent globally, in other words, it's the type of diabetes that you will find the minority of people suffering from, it is actually not so much linked to lifestyle, but it's a disorder that happens because your body actually attacks its own organs. Then a few other factors just to remind you of what also affects your immune system is a lack of sleep. And that is why right at the beginning of this presentation, I reminded you of the World Health Organization's definition of health. So it's not just about what you put into your mouth, but for instance, something that has become very topical is that to make sure that your immune system is up to speed as such, you need to get sufficient sleep. And why we need to sleep sufficiently and have good quality sleep is that while you are sleeping, your body produces substances called cytokines, which are a very important part of your immune system. So adults need 7 to 8 hours of sleep, and you can see teenagers need slightly more, and then the younger children are the more sleep they need. Now, with the fact that people have been locked in, it's also important not to oversleep as such, because if you sleep too much, it actually disrupts your sleeping pattern, and therefore your quality of sleep that you are actually getting is not optimal. And then of course the aged community, or elderly as it's known, has been receiving a lot of attention, and I'm going to just walk you through a few reasons why the elderly are so vulnerable to viruses like COVID. When you age, it reduces the production of lymphocytes or white blood cells. And also those white blood cells that are produced are not as effective as they would be for younger individuals. Now, what I'm trying to show you here on this slide is that there's a whole bouquet of reasons why the elderly are so vulnerable. And please note the heading at the top of the slide, because this is definitely the proverbial food for thought, is that 33% of elderly in industrialized countries have existing nutritional deficiencies, which is very sobering if you consider the fact that South Africa is a developing country, and therefore you can imagine that the more individuals we have that live under the breadline or that are battling to make ends meet, their likelihood of having nutritional deficiencies actually increases exponentially. So the elderly, for instance, might have a lack of appetite because your ability to taste foods and your sense of smell actually decreases as you age, and your appetite could also be affected by multiple medications. And then the elderly, especially if they live in a very isolated environment, might suffer from depression, loneliness. For instance, loss of a spouse is life-changing. I mentioned medication, but many elderly individuals are on not only one, but numerous medications that could also affect your ability to utilize nutrients and therefore could impact on your nutritional status. Then your organs in general do function less optimally as you age. So on top of all of those things, the elderly also could suffer from malabsorption. That basically means that the food that they do eat, their body is not able to extract optimal amounts of nutrients from the food that they do consume. And then increased needs relates to the fact that when you are ill, your body actually needs more nutrients than under normal circumstances. And that actually just compounds the whole problem of nutrient deficiencies. But yet the shopping list isn't over, because if you look at this slide, there are even more factors that compromise the immune system of the elderly. They might not have sufficient financial abilities, so in other words, a limited budget, loss of income, because and maybe their pensions might not be sufficient or adequate to maintain a healthy lifestyle, but due to depression or simply just because of circumstances, they might not cook as often, or for instance, it might not be very enticing to cook if you're only living by yourself and therefore cooking for one person. Many elderly battle with poor dentition. In other words, they don't have their full complement of teeth, and therefore the ability to chew becomes difficult. And with a reduced ability to chew, it limits the types of foods that you are able to ingest. Then mental impairment relates to the fact that you could have problems like Alzheimer's disease, which increases your ability to be forgetful, and not to be as aware of your environment, your surroundings, and of course your body's needs, whether it be for thirst or hunger, etc. And then the last but not least is that the elderly maybe could have a problem with being transported to areas, shopping malls, etc., where they can purchase healthy food. And our community is not always geared up to support the elderly sufficiently in terms of, for instance, like I don't know if you've heard of the concept, but you get Meals on Wheels, which is a service that would deliver meals to the elderly's homes. If we then look at the role of diet in optimal immunity, just be aware of the fact that science is an ever-evolving discipline. So at this moment in time, we don't have sufficient evidence regarding the specific dietary factors that can actually reduce the risk of acute infections like COVID. But having said that, to make sure that your immune system is functioning optimally, you need to eat a healthy diet, which relates to having a wide variety of foods, being physically active, because your physical level of activity also enhances your immune system. And very, very importantly during these times is to manage stress, and as I previously mentioned, get sufficient sleep. And then last but not least, large population studies that they've conducted have shown most definitely that individuals that are malnourished are at greater risk of infections. And that relates to many members of South African society. This slide is just to set the scene for a few concepts that I'm going to address shortly. And you will see there that there are terms like antioxidants, free radicals, etc. And then just to remind you that free radicals are not a political party. But the reason why free radicals are very important to be aware of is that they do play a role in your body's immune system. But if your body is overwhelmed by free radicals, then it becomes detrimental to your health. So if we start on the left-hand side of the screen at the top, when you have an atom, atoms have paired electrons. And what happens is that free radicals are molecules or atoms that are very unstable. And as a result, they tend to, you could say, scavenge or steal an electron from healthy atoms. And the reason why antioxidants on the right-hand side there seem so giving is that antioxidants are substances that we can ingest via diet that actually freely donate, if you would like to think of it that way, a electron to, for instance, free radicals, and in the process stop the destructive ability of free radicals, because free radicals are very unstable atoms. So if you look at the middle visual, so you have a normal cell, and then what happens is when a normal cell is attacked by free radicals, you end up with a cell, a body cell that's been exposed to oxidative stress, and that can impair the function of the cell to the extent that it makes you more susceptible to disease. It can affect your DNA, which is of course our genetic makeup, and that makes us also very prone to disease. So if we look at what sources of free radicals are, first of all, just the reminder then, as I said initially, that under normal circumstances, your body does produce free radicals, and they do play an important role in your immune system. However, when your body is overwhelmed by free radicals, for instance, due to medication, exposure to air pollution, cigarette smoke, alcohol, or radiation, that could actually increase the levels of free radicals. And in that case scenario, the body is unable to cope with this onslaught. So just to cover up, or just to recap quickly, the body is then under constant attack from oxidative stress, which is caused by free radicals. So I've already explained the concept about the fact that atoms have electrons that prefer to be in pairs. And if these electrons are not in pairs, they are actually referred to as free radicals, which then try to scavenge electrons from other atoms in order to stabilize themselves. And then we spoke about the damage that free radicals can cause. And free radical damage is linked to health conditions like cancer, atherosclerosis, Alzheimer's disease, and aging. Antioxidants then, of course, are the superheroes in this scenario, because they then donate an electron to free radicals, and in the process they don't become destabilized, and therefore it doesn't affect their functionality. So it's then very important that we consume sufficient antioxidants via our diet, because that will actually stop this cascade of damage caused by free radicals. I'm not going to go over the extent of food sources quoted here, but just be mindful of what is stated on the left-hand side of the slide, because vitamin C, vitamin E, beta carotene, which is also referred to as provitamin A, selenium, and zinc, are the dietary sources of antioxidants that can actually combat the onslaught that free radicals pose to our bodies on a daily basis. And beta carotene is also known as provitamin A. Now, important just to be aware of is you don't even have to remember all the various food sources that are linked to individual vitamins, minerals, or trace elements. Importantly is just to be aware of the concept phytochemicals. Now, phytochemicals are chemical compounds that are produced by plants, and that is why any plant food, whether it be fruit or vegetables or products that are made of from fruit and vegetables, have their distinct color, taste, and smell. And the good thing then is that foods that are sources of phytochemicals are also very rich in antioxidants. And therefore, if you see the rainbow there, as well as the food sources at the bottom, the important message here is that when you choose food, choose the most brightly colored fruits and vegetables that you can find. And if you look at the colors of the rainbow, you will find that you can in fact match foods according to the colors of the rainbow. So just to give you an example, the red part of the rainbow, think of tomatoes. And if you look at the most bottom part of that rainbow, for instance, berries do have purple pigments in them. Sorry, I'm just having a problem here with changing the slide. There we go. Now, if we think back to the fact that health is not only reliant on specific individual factors, but it's a holistic approach, the very important thing during these times is that you've got to think positive, because your mindset is vital to getting through this pandemic, both physically as well as mentally. So you might have heard of the concept, or if you have not, it's referred to the power of positive thinking. And what this relates to is how you actually choose to live your life. And it is very trying during the current pandemic to think positively, but it's important to be mindful of the fact that thinking positively as much as possible actually can influence your well-being. And what this amounts to is whether you, for instance, view a glass as half empty or half full, because people that are more positive tend to actually cope with stress better. And of course, to the extent that stress does influence your health or well-being, it is very important to try and stay positive and find things that can actually assist you in staying positive. Then something that is also very important to be aware of is what is referred to as the placebo effect. Now, a placebo is, it's basically like a sugar-coated pill. So if you look at the illustration or the figure image at the bottom of the slide, you will then see you've got, for instance, there a medication versus the figure having a sweet. And a placebo is something that you might be drinking that doesn't have an actual effect on your well-being, but because of your mind having a belief that this specific substance, supplement, etc., that you are consuming has a positive effect, it actually does. In other words, in this case, it's definitely a matter of mind over matter. But the important thing then is that a placebo might make you feel better, but it won't cure you. And this is then where, if you look at various supplements and other things that have been marketed to supposedly protect you against COVID, a lot of them do not have active functional ingredients in them that will have a positive impact on your health. But it's the belief that this particular product or supplement will work that could have a positive effect, but there's no real active ingredient in the placebo. So it's all a matter of believing that the treatment will actually work. Then if we look at the general aspects of health, and whatever we do to our bodies and whatever we take, it's very important to first do no harm. So it brings us to supplementation. And the question then is a round pill a substitute for a square meal? And unfortunately, the answer is no, because if you take a supplement, you do get vitamins and minerals from that supplement. But then if you refer back to the phytochemicals that I told you about earlier on, vitamin and mineral supplements do not contain phytochemicals. And that is just but one example of what supplements do not contain. So it is always best to get nutrients from food as opposed to supplements. If we then also look at supplements on the market, you will find that sometimes a lot of these supplements contain really large amounts of single vitamins. And the reason for that is because manufacturers of these products often include large amounts of those vitamins and minerals that are relatively cheap. And that is why some of these supplements are very unbalanced in their composition. Then if we look at the whole concept of synthetic versus natural supplements, they are basically identical. If you read labels, if you go to your local supermarket, for instance, but synthetic vitamins, in other words, those that are manufactured under chemical circumstances, are much cheaper, whereas natural ones are extracted from food per se. So just be mindful of that. And if you then choose to drink a supplement as extra health insurance, just make sure that it contains a wide variety of nutrients. I've given you an example there of 20 different vitamins and minerals. That's just a sort of a rule of thumb, but the point is it's not good to take a single vitamin. For argument's sake, let's say just drinking a vitamin C supplement. And then, as I mentioned, supplements never give you the full complement of what the body needs. And then importantly is that vitamins in excess, I'm talking in this case, especially in supplementation, can be harmful, which a lot of members of the public aren't aware of. And the only time when large doses of vitamins are justified is when people have an existing deficiency. Or, for instance, we referred to the elderly earlier on, they have an inability to absorb or use a particular nutrient. And in cases like that, a supplement is justified. If you do take a supplement, just make sure that you don't exceed the recommended dosage, because in this case, more is not necessarily better. And then if we look at water-soluble vitamins like B vitamins and vitamin C, your body cannot store them. So if you take these vitamins without there being a need for the body to use them, or in other words, if you don't have a deficiency, you are to a certain extent just producing expensive urine, because what the body cannot need or use, at a particular time, you actually would then flush out through your kidneys. Then herbal supplements. Echinacea is something that you might have noticed in your local health shop or in the supermarket. It's an extract made from a particular plant, and laboratory studies have shown that echinacea can destroy flu viruses, but the point is we can only say without a doubt that something is effective if human studies have shown that these, for instance, in this case, supplement does work. Garlic is also something that gets a lot of attention, whether it be for colds, flu, etc. And the reason for that is that garlic does contain an active ingredient that gives garlic its distinctive, for instance, smell. And this supposedly has antiviral and antimicrobial effects, for instance, on the common cold. But there is a lack of clinical trials that have shown that taking garlic supplements is effective when compared to placebo. In other words, if you take something that does not contain the active ingredients in garlic, they haven't shown any difference between the two. Again, bringing you back to the fact that if you believe something is going to work, it could to a certain extent assist. But note also the word garlic supplement there. It's not actually taking the garlic. So you're taking concentrated amounts of the active ingredients in garlic. So if we then look at trials that have been done, taking a garlic supplement for 3 months has resulted in fewer occurrences of the common cold versus placebo. In other words, the non-active component that participants in the study took. But what was quite interesting is once people actually got the common cold, the duration was the same, irrespective of whether they took the placebo or garlic. Then green tea is also something that has received some attention because it can prevent flu, some cold viruses, etc., and enhance the immune system. But the evidence that we have on humans are very limited. And again, notice there the fact that I've highlighted the word capsules. The studies that they've done was actually not related to people drinking green tea. They actually took a very concentrated amounts of the active substances in green tea. And that produced less cold and flu symptoms or the incidence of flu than placebo. But the problem then is sometimes in science you get what is referred to as conflict of interest. And why these two trials that are out there did provide promising results. What unfortunately puts a bit of a cloud over it is that both of these studies were funded or authored by individuals that have had affiliations with the tea industry. And therefore, one needs to consider that maybe there could have been a level of bias. Now, getting on to spotting the myths related to COVID, very importantly is if there is a medical breakthrough, you will hear of this breakthrough through a media, like for instance, television, radio, or you will see announcements by reputable organizations like for instance, the Department of Health in South Africa or the World Health Organization. So please be mindful that if you hear about something for the very first time via email, online advertisements, or any other kind of sales pitch, or you look at Facebook, they are unfortunately not reputable sources of information. And I actually wanted to just, I clipped this from the World Health Organization's webpage, just to show you that they in fact do have something on their webpage that is specifically set aside for giving the public advice. And you can, if you go to this website, you will find that there's a whole lot of myths that they've actually listed, and you can go and check whether something you heard about or read about is in fact truth or whether it is a myth. So we mentioned already that garlic has not been proven to be something protective in terms of COVID. And then again, this particular blue box I clipped from the World Health Organization's website. So there is no evidence at this stage that garlic will protect you. It might protect you from vampires, and maybe you will lose all your friends because your breath is so smelly, but unfortunately it's not going to enhance your immune system. And then, for instance, just to give you one other example of myths that are going around is there are people that believe if you add a lot of spicy food, in this case it was related to chilies, hot chilies to your food, that it will actually prevent or cure COVID, but that has also been dispelled and is a myth. Here's just a shopping list of reliable sources of information that you can revert to when in doubt. And if you want any further information, you can contact Sindiswa and Vinuasha from Extended Learning. And the last slide is just to give you an idea of the upcoming webinars that Extended Learning will be offering. So thank you very, very much for tuning in this morning. And I hope that you found this presentation of value. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sona. We do have a few questions that have come through. If anyone also wants to verbally ask a question, do please raise your hand. But I'll get on to the typed questions for now. From Carlo, is alcohol a placebo? And there's like a little laughing face.
I suppose anything can be a placebo if you believe it to be true. And that is, I don't know if you've read the tabloids of people that resorted to drinking bleach, and unfortunately they demised as a result. So I suppose if you think alcohol is going to get you through the tough times, then you could possibly refer to it as a placebo, although in excess it's not a very good placebo.
Okay, thanks. And then from Charmaine, vaccines, are they not a conflict of interest when research is funded by large pharmaceuticals?
Now, yes, it could be controversial. However, what happens is in a case of doing trials on vaccines, this type of research is extremely expensive, and therefore you need funding, otherwise you won't be able to develop something that's effective. And what then happens is that when you actually find something to be effective and it's published, you actually cite who funded, for instance, the study, the research, etc. So I think when it comes to developing drugs that are helpful to mankind and that have proven to work, I think the conflict of interest is not at the level that I previously mentioned when we, for instance, spoke about green tea.
Okay, I have a question here from Nadaraj Govender. So if you want to ask your question, just check if you are unmuted.
Thank you, Sona, for the wonderful presentation.
You're welcome.
I really enjoyed the conceptual explanation of free radicals. My question, I have two. One is about using when we cook foods, what is the effect on antioxidant? Fresh raw foods better than cooked foods with regard to antioxidants?
Well, you know, heat does destroy, for instance, antioxidants. Yes, that's true. But there one needs to then just make sure that you don't, you know, cook something until it is totally wilted and etc. So yes, a raw would be better in terms of preserving nutrients. But if you do cook, for instance, vegetables, it's important not to cook them until they are totally wilted. And so if you monitor the cooking process and also limit the amount of cooking water that you use, then you should not lose a significant amount of antioxidants. And just remember also that, you know, you get, for instance, if you look at children that are not very keen on eating vegetables, they will be more likely to eat a vegetable if it is part of a stew, as opposed to eating, let's say, raw carrot sticks. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Can I ask another one?
Yes, sure.
The other question is that people are selling cholesterol in the form of powder. It's very popular now, very convincing and highly priced. And I know it's good for just immunity from, let us say, recovery from illness, but I'm not sure It seems to be a panacea for everything.
Well, you see, that's what I was trying to bring across. If you, for instance, go to, let's say, health food stores, etc., there are so many things that are sold, and the supplementation business is mammoth in terms of the amount of money people spend. And a lot of these things that are sold have not been proven to work effectively or work at all, for that matter. And yet, because of clever marketing and the way the labeling on these products are, people actually, and again, it's, food is the one thing in our life, or what goes into our mouth is the one thing that we have control over. And that is also why supplements, whether they have any benefit or not, gain such ground, and why people spend money unnecessarily.
Thank you. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Okay, thanks. We have a question from Charmaine. Would it not have been beneficial to have a herd mentality as opposed to this harsh economic lockdown with severe job loss?
Well, I am not an epidemiologist. I'm a dietitian, so I don't think I am qualified to comment on that. So I think we best leave that up to the scientists that do study these aspects.
Okay, and then another one from Sazizo. Smoking can cure headache. Is that placebo?
I think that could be. And of course,
we got
yes.
jokers, yeah.
Well, I love jokes, hence you introducing the fact that I love being a monster-in-law, so it's absolutely fine.
Okay, and then from Josie Ann, would you advise to diabetics in terms of boosting their, what would you advise to diabetics in terms of boosting their immune systems? Please take the diet into account.
Well, when it comes to being diabetic, as I said, the first thing is to make sure that you are consuming a wide variety of foods via your diet. And if you then feel that you want to take extra health insurance, you can take a supplement, but just make sure that you don't overdo it, and then you can revert back to the brief guidelines I gave you. But for diabetics, it's really important to, for instance, plan their diet around a diet that's high in fruit and vegetables, whole grain cereals, going slow on the fat intake, etc. And of course, legumes, in other words, beans, split peas, lentils, those kind of foods is also really, really helpful for somebody that suffers from diabetes.
Okay, and then one from Vikash. What is your opinion on the lack of vitamin D and COVID-19?
Now, with vitamin D, it's been getting a lot of coverage, and the research stems from countries that do not have a lot of sunlight. Now, vitamin D has over time been shown to be very, very effective, not only in terms of, many decades ago, the only thing we knew about vitamin D is that it prevents rickets, which is a bone disease. So vitamin D is very, very important. But I think it also got a lot of coverage because the countries where COVID started are, when COVID started, they were in winter. And so there are indications where they've actually advised individuals to take a vitamin D supplement. I know it's getting very cold here in South Africa, but it's important to spend as much time as you can outside. You don't have to, roast yourself in the sunlight, but your body produces vitamin D if you go outside and you expose just a little bit of your skin to the sun's rays, and therefore, yes, it's most definitely of benefit. But again, time will tell, because if you look at the studies that have been published, they are coming out fast and furiously, but the more studies we have, the more convincing the evidence is that something works or that it doesn't.
Okay, and then back to the diabetic question, Charmaine is asking, how would one know if they are diabetic?
Now, when you are diabetic, what some of the symptoms are is that you get very, very thirsty. And because of the fact that you get very thirsty, you end up urinating a lot. You could, for instance, lose weight without actually restricting your food intake. You could feel very, very dizzy. And all of that is related to the fact that the food that you are eating is not being utilized optimally. But I think especially feeling very, very tired despite eating and being very thirsty are definitely signs that you should maybe seek medical advice. And then, of course, the important aspect to remember is that we spoke about type 1 diabetes earlier on, which is the less prevalent one in any society across the globe. But type 2 diabetes is the one that you very often get later in life, but that is very, very strongly linked to obesity and extra weight gain. And therefore, prevention is better than cure. And therefore, to make sure that you are not prone to developing type 2 diabetes, it's always a good thing to make sure that you stay active, that you don't gain unnecessary weight, and so forth.
Okay, and then we have a question from Sanele. What is your opinion on the Madagascan herbal tonic being touted as a treatment for COVID-19?
I think we don't have enough evidence at this stage. So we need to see rigorous study results first before we can actually make any conclusive decisions regarding that.
Okay, and then we have another question from Nadaraj, who's going to ask it verbally. So let me just make sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you to the host. I think you pronounced my name correctly.
Okay, good.
Yes, thank you. So now I just want to ask you about, maybe it's a philosophical question, but there seems to be a weak relationship between beliefs, positive attitudes, and some form of recovery. So my question is, what is the strength of the science behind beliefs in this regard?
Look, I can't quantify it for you, to be quite honest, because I haven't seen them actually say that, you know, if your mindset is X, your recovery would be Y. And I think it's also, the reason for that is that how do you actually measure, how do you rate objectively somebody's frame of mind? The thing is just that if you are very negative and very depressed, you are more inclined to resort to an unhealthy lifestyle and maybe self-soothe, for instance, by abusing alcohol, or not wanting to exercise because you feel unhappy, not wanting to get out, not wanting to socialize. And human beings are herd animals as such. And especially during this time of isolation or lockdown, I think it's been very difficult for people from a mental perspective to be so isolated from friends and family. So yes, I can't quote any statistics for you, but it's not just about the fact that your mindset has got a specific effect. It's the fact that the mindset has an influence on other factors. And with any health problem, the important message that I also want to bring across here is there are so many factors that are related to one, for instance, let's say catching a cold, or I even say to my students, if you do well in a test, you know, there are numerous reasons for it, because either you studied hard, you're very smart, or your lecturer is brilliant. But, you know, so yeah, so things are not as easy to figure out as what they seem.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
Okay, I'm just going to launch a poll in the background while we're still continuing with the Q&A. It's just to rate how the session was today. But I have another question here from Tutu. So if you can, you're able to unmute your mic, Tutu.
Okay, hi Sarah.
Uh-huh.
Hi, Suna. My question is just with regards to the runners outside. Because of the very cold weather right now, we're all braving out and going to run outside. What foods would you recommend for the runners to take to avoid the common cold and the common flus? Because by the time you are done, you have basically frozen outside.
Okay, now as a matter of interest, if you engage in very vigorous exercise, would you believe it actually generates free radicals? And if you look at sports drinks, you will, if you have ever read the labeling on them, you will see that they do contain vitamin C. So I would say you don't need to take a supplement, but if you are a runner, just make sure that you eat. I know it's not a very glamorous message, but eat a wide variety of foods, eat regularly, very, very importantly. And in terms of the cold, just dress warmly. But don't stop running, please. It's really, really good for you in a multitude of ways.
Yeah. No, it's just because we want to drink something that ensures that because we've been cold, you don't get
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. In other words, are you saying something that you want to drink to warm up after you've exercised?
Yeah, to avoid my chest and my coughing.
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't know if you are a tea drinker, but you can have a couple of slices of lemon into your tea. Or you can maybe make sure that when you get home that you maybe have some hot soup waiting. But just remember the packet soups, the instant ones, they can be very high in salt. So it's quite a good idea to make homemade soup, because then you don't get, at least you get the heat or the warming up effect of the soup. You get many nutrients because of what you put into the soup. Okay,
thank you.
Pleasure.
Okay, and we just have 3 more questions on the Q&A. From Kutenda, food supplements are preserved. What are the possible effects of preservative agents to the immune system?
I haven't come across any evidence that say that, that where they've quantified that particular preservatives have an effect on the immune system. And I think what people need to also be aware of is that there is regulations regarding the addition of preservatives and additives to the foods that we commonly eat. So it's not as if a manufacturer can throw in just as many preservatives and additives as they would like to. It's regulated, and with regards to the relationship to immunity, I have not seen any literature regarding that.
Okay, and then another question from Matthew Till. Are there any foods we should avoid, food which actually compromise our immune systems?
You know what? Variety is the spice of life. So I don't think one needs to avoid foods per se. But I would say just for general health, it would be good to go for foods that are nutrient dense. And that means that especially when it comes to snack foods, for instance, crisps, etc., I would say go slow on the snack foods is very important, because they're very high in salt. Some snack foods maybe are very high in sugar. And so you get the energy, but you actually don't get a lot of nutrients coming from them. And therefore, when you are snacking during this time, just make sure that you snack on healthier options. And it doesn't have to be carrot sticks. Have a fruit. Make yourself a whole wheat sandwich with peanut butter and jam, or put something that you enjoy on your sandwich, but just steer clear of always reverting to the very salty and sugary snack foods, I would say.
Okay, and then one more Q&A question from Varuni. What have been the most common dietary nutrition-related issues seen in COVID patients?
I think You know, it depends on the level of disease that they've encountered. You know, in other words, what I'm saying is, to which extent were they ill? But if you look at the symptoms of COVID, that's been very interesting. One of the symptoms that came through quite clearly was that people tended to lose their sense of smell. Which obviously, you know, if you think of when you have a very bad cold and your nose is all clogged up, if you can't smell, it does affect your appetite. So I would say from a dietary perspective, that is to me the most profound, or you know, the one aspect related to diet that has stood out. And then, of course, just remember that when you have a viral infection, your nutrient needs are actually increased, irrespective of the source or the origin of the virus. So, yeah.
Okay, and then we've just got one more Q&A that's come through and one raised hand. So after these two, we'll finish, and if there's any more additional questions, you can send it through in the email that goes out later today, and we can get Suna to answer. So the one that's come in the Q&A is from Soren. What are your thoughts on cannabis oil, spirulina, and interferon alpha?
Is that, I assume that is linked to immunity. Your body does produce, for instance, interferon, and therefore I don't, you know, if you're a healthy individual, you don't need to take supplements regarding that. Spirulina is basically dried seaweed, and you know, if you look at the amounts that you would consume as per the manufacturer's recommendations, if you actually had to convert that into food, you probably, and I don't want to shoot myself here in the foot or get a death threat, but you're probably better off just actually having, you know, foods, for instance, in the case of spirulina, have spinach, have broccoli, you know, have other green vegetables. So again, be very careful of what manufacturers and what marketing tells us to buy, eat, and consume.
Okay, and then we got one last question from Kotenda. So I'm going to allow you to talk. You can ask your question. I don't know if it's... so Kotenda, unfortunately, you can't talk. Your Zoom is an older version of Zoom. If you are able to post your question. Otherwise, perhaps in the mail you can post your question there. Okay, but thanks, Suna. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. And we look forward to your upcoming webinars. Congrats on your first webinar experience. And I know it was quite stressful, but we thank you for the valuable information.
Yeah, the logging in was the most stressful part. The presentation was actually fine. Anyway.
But thank you for the information you shared with us all. So the videos and the slides will be available on our website, and we'll also be sending this direct link out to everyone. There will also be an opportunity for any additional questions or comments. You can respond on that email. So thank you for joining us, and do take note of the upcoming webinars on your screen. The next one for next week on Tuesday, we have a resilience through mindfulness. It's part 1 of the series. And then Suna will be back with us on Thursday, talking about healthy eating and living while staying at home. So we also have a few online courses that we're offering for free during the lockdown period. We are sharing our own courses as well as partnering with organizations in order to provide free access. So please visit our website, www.ukznextendedlearning.com, to see what we have to offer. Otherwise, we hope that you enjoyed the session. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.